诡异的商业现象出现了。武汉1400万人口
The strangest business phenomenon has occurred. Wuhan, with its 14 million people, has suddenly stopped eating out. Restaurant owners say no one is coming to dine anymore. Everyone is buying groceries and cooking at home. Market vendors say shoppers are now ordering through delivery platforms. Delivery drivers are crying, saying their orders have dropped significantly. In the end, the conclusion is clear. Everyone is trying to lose weight. Some say that people in the city have all gone back to their hometowns, but those in the hometowns say the malls are so empty they could film a ghost movie. What's even stranger is that this scene is happening in every city across the country. Data from a platform shows that the frequency of dining consumption nationwide has dropped by 36.8%, while the corresponding household grocery purchases have only increased by 5.7%. This math problem is starting to feel more and more terrifying. So, where have the consumers gone? What are they eating now? The responses online are heartbreaking. I only eat one meal a day, and I cook it myself. Spending money should be minimized. Eat less. Breathe more air. Is this the only thing that doesn't cost anything for now? Now I can only afford one meal a day. No money.
你看上海这么豪华了不营业啊，大星期天的。
Even Shanghai's luxury pedestrian streets are completely empty on Sundays. Look, there's not a single person. If this were a third or fourth tier city, we could understand, but this is Shanghai, China's economic center. If China's 1.4 billion people can't stimulate consumer spending, who can tell me why? There's no one in the malls, no one on the streets, and no one in the pedestrian areas. Where did you all go? Everywhere feels lifeless, with no hustle and bustle. There's no sense of being in an international metropolis. People said, money is in the hands of the top 5%, while the rest of us have no money to spend. Those with money have billions, while those without are even hesitating over whether to add an egg to their bowl of noodles. The U.S. has imposed tariffs of up to 245% on Chinese imports, while China has levied a 125% tariff on U.S. goods. As a result, China's direct exports to the U.S. have nearly ceased. Many Chinese foreign trade companies, particularly those reliant on U.S. markets, face vanishing orders, factory shutdowns, and financial hardship, with widespread economic distress. Analysts attribute blocked external demand to China's non-compliance with international norms and insufficient domestic demand to structural economic issues. Unlike Western economies driven by consumption, China's limited purchasing power hampers growth. China's economic drivers, investment, exports, and consumption have weakened, with consumer spending declining significantly. The tariff measures initiated by Trump have worsened China's economic downturn and highlighted systemic challenges under Chinese governance, which authorities have obscured through misinformation. China expert Wang He stated, "The entire country of China is a sweatshop. The Chinese people produce massive amounts of goods, but they can't even consume them themselves. This is a huge irony and a tragedy for China." Trump's tariffs aim to underscore the prolonged economic suppression faced by Chinese citizens, urging self-reliance for change. Wang He notes that state media misrepresents U.S. actions as attacks on China rather than responses to Chinese policies, perpetuating a significant falsehood. Analysts suggest China's economy will continue to contract under multiple pressures. Persistent foreign policy missteps, interference in private enterprises, a distorted real estate market, and stringent pandemic controls have compounded economic challenges, weakening the ruling regime's stability. In China, there has always been a question. After joining the WTO, why does China insist on selling its products to the United States? Wouldn't it be better for Chinese people to consume the products they manufacture themselves? Experts have identified three main reasons. The first reason is weak consumer purchasing power. A senior researcher at the Stanford Center on China's Economy and Institutions, Xu Chenggang, has repeatedly mentioned in recent interviews that all of this stems from the CCP's totalitarian system. He stated, China's economic development faces a fundamental issue with the political system, and that insufficient internal demand is a common characteristic of authoritarian regimes. He believes that the CCP has taken most of the profits from economic development through land and banks. To solve the problem of insufficient domestic demand and to raise a share of household income in GDP, privatization is essential. According to the World Bank in 2022, the share of household consumption in China's GDP is 37%. This means that of the wealth created by the hard work of Chinese people in a year, only 1/3 is consumed domestically, while the remaining 2/3 are used for investment or exports. In contrast, the share of final household consumption in the GDP of the US is 68% and Japan is 56%, 31 and 19 percentage points higher than China. When including government consumption and household consumption, the share of final consumption in China's GDP is 53%, while in the US it's 82%, which is 28 percentage points higher than China. Developed countries such as those in Europe and Japan generally have a final consumption share of GDP above 70%, with South Korea at 67% and India at 72%, all significantly higher than China. A Chinese vlogger further explained, using specific data, why Chinese people's consumption purchasing power is so low.
14亿人的中国为什么消费力不？
Why is the purchasing power of China's 1.4 billion people so low? Why do we always think about selling things to foreigners? Let me explain. There's a term called disposable income. In the past, I might have thought of earning 10,000 or 20,000 yuan a month was normal, but then I saw data from CICC statistics which show that only 8.5 million people in the entire country earn over 10,000 yuan a month, making up just over 0.6% of the population. For an average household, there are car loans and mortgages to pay, along with expenses for parents' healthcare, children's education, and more. These account for over 80% of the income, and this doesn't even include expenses like clothes, food, or weddings. Disposable income is incredibly limited. Now take Thailand as an example. In public hospitals, medical fees are capped at 30 Thai baht, which is about 6 yuan. Public education is completely free, and there's no need for a bride price when getting married. Every family can have land, and they can build their own houses. Although the average monthly income is only around 3,000 yuan, their disposable income is actually higher than the income of people in China earning 10,000 yuan a month. People commented, "It's extremely difficult for people in rural areas to even make 1,000 or 2,000 yuan." Some also sarcastically remarked, "Earn 10,000 yuan, but only have 1,000 yuan in disposable income. Does that mean 9,000 yuan is spent on consumption? It just shows that the less disposable income you have, the better." Hong Kong CEIC data reported that the share of personal consumption in China's household expenditures as a percentage of GDP was 37.7 in 2020, 38.2 in 2021, 37.4 in 2022, and 39.2% in 2023. In addition, the Chinese government's spending on welfare is far lower than that of other countries. According to the latest from the World Bank, in 2021, the Chinese government allocated only about 6% of GDP to services directly benefiting residents, such as healthcare and social security. China's welfare spending lags behind most of the BRICS countries, including Brazil and Russia, and is also lower than that of many other emerging and developed countries. Economists widely recognize that China's economic challenges stem from insufficient domestic demand and subdued consumption, a persistent structural issue. Household income constitutes a small share of economic distribution, with substantial capital allocated to infrastructure and high-tech sectors. Additionally, China's social welfare system, encompassing healthcare, pensions, and education, remains underdeveloped compared to advanced economies. The second reason is the uneven distribution of purchasing power. Professor Li Chang from the Department of Sociology at Tsinghua University pointed out in his book, T-Shaped Social Structure and Structural Tension, that China's social structure is extremely polarized, resembling an inverted T-shape. Using socioeconomic status indicators to measure China's employed population, he discovered a large group at the very bottom of the socioeconomic spectrum, which forms the horizontal bar of the inverted T. The vertical bar represents a series of different socioeconomic classes, which together form a long vertical group. Apart from the large wealth gap, there are vast differences in demand between social groups, making social exchange difficult. Only about 20% of the population in China has real consumer purchasing power. Many social issues, such as problems with order, security, poverty, and prostitution, can be explained by this inverted T structure. Wang He noted that China's middle income group is significantly smaller than in other developed regions. Japan, with over 100 million people, is predominantly middle class, as are the United States and Taiwan. These societies have an olive-shaped structure with a robust middle-income segment and smaller proportions of the extremely wealthy and poor. In 2020, former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang stated that 600 million Chinese earn approximately 1,000 yuan monthly, with an average annual income of 30,000 yuan. High household debt, low per capita income, and limited purchasing power further constrain consumption.
重庆现在最真实的状态说出来你可能都不敢相信。
The current reality in Chongqing is something you might not even believe. On the surface, it looks like a bustling city with traffic jams everywhere. In the city, where the average monthly income is over 3,000 yuan, many people's monthly loan payments exceed 10,000 yuan. Large companies are cutting salaries and laying off workers, while small companies are on the brink of bankruptcy. The owners of brick-and-mortar stores are suffering greatly. After a month, they might not even make enough to cover rent and utilities. Many office workers are constantly in a state of robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking out online loans or using credit cards to keep up with their monthly payments. Data shows that the average savings in Chongqing is 300,000 yuan, but the average debt exceeds 300,000 yuan. This is the real situation for most people in Chongqing. How much longer can they endure this?
Here are the comments from viewers online. Is it only Chongqing? It feels like many places are like this. I only spend 5 yuan a day on groceries. I basically don't buy new clothes for a whole month. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. In January 2024, Hong Kong CEIC data reported that China's household debt surpassed $11 trillion, a 50% increase from 5 years prior. While U.S. household debt is higher at $17 trillion, China's per capita income is less than one-third of the U.S.'s. A 2018 report from the Shanghai Advanced Institute of Finance, cited by China News, noted that by 2017, China's household debt to disposable income ratio reached 107%, exceeding the U.S.'s level and nearing its pre-financial crisis peak. High housing prices are the primary driver of this debt. Wang He stated that China's housing reforms over the past 2 decades have extracted wealth through real estate. Families exhaust their resources, spanning multiple generations, to afford homes, resulting in widespread mortgage debt. The People's Bank of China reported in 2020 that 70% of urban household assets in China are tied to residential properties, limiting their conversion into purchasing power. Wang He explained, the wealth of the Chinese people has already been drained. It was already very little, and now it's been further depleted. Where is the consumption going to come from? So it's not that Chinese products can only be sold abroad and not domestically. The people here simply can't afford to buy them. Despite frequent mentions of consumption in this year's government work report, China's income asset and debt structures severely restrict citizens' ability to purchase domestically produced goods. On March 16, the General Office of the Chinese Communist Party and the State Council released the Special Action Plan to Boost Consumption to revive weak consumer sentiment. Foreign economists, however, argue that Beijing is misdiagnosing the issue. George Magnus, an economist at Oxford University's China Center, posted on X that China's government has reversed cause and effect. He stated that weak consumption stems from the government's macroeconomic and industrial policies, not low sentiment, which is a consequence of these policies. Magnus noted that the plan aligns with last year's 3rd plenary session, the Central Economic Work Conference, and the recent National People's Congress, but lacks detailed funding for demand-driven initiatives. He explains that the government appears reluctant to increase investment, and the focus on boosting supply of goods and services misses China's core issue, its industrial and export model, which undermines consumer and business confidence. Since the U.S.-China trade war began, Chinese state media has portrayed the U.S. as hegemonic, ignoring China's high tariffs on U.S. goods, despite near-zero U.S. tariffs on Chinese products. This burdens Chinese consumers and fuels misinformation, framing U.S. actions as attacks on China's prosperity rather than responses to Chinese policies. Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo once called for distinguishing the CCP from the Chinese people. In a speech on U.S.-China policy at the Nixon Library in July 2020, he stated that the Chinese people are dynamic, freedom-loving people who are completely distinct from the Chinese Communist Party. Wang He remarked, The primary goal of the two U.S. tariff wars was not to destroy China's economy, but to use extreme pressure to cause internal division within the CCP, enabling the Chinese people with external help to more easily and effectively abandon the CCP, promoting a peaceful societal transformation in China. So, Trump's tariff wars were directly aimed at the CCP. Commentators suggest Trump's tariffs accelerate decoupling from China, anticipating retaliatory tariffs that halted U.S.-China trade. Trump has emphasized preventing China from funding military threats against the U.S. Economists stress that confidence drives economic growth, but under China's authoritarian rule, absent legal protections for businesses and personal wealth, confidence remains elusive. Although the CCP has proposed economic reforms, these are merely acts of desperation. Senior researcher scholar Shu Chenggang stated at the 2024 Princeton Research Network on Contemporary China conference that China's economic development faces political system issues. The reason for the CCP's reform and opening up over 40 years ago, and the reason for the regression in the past decade is the same: to preserve the CCP's authoritarian rule. Observers describe China's economy as predatory, prioritizing state wealth over public prosperity, exploiting citizens to maintain control. While Trump's trade measures impact Chinese industries, they offer citizens an opportunity to recognize and challenge the ruling party's policies. A collapse of the Communist Party in this trade conflict would mark a significant moment for Chinese citizens and the global community.